Deep-seated in the southwestern Pacific is Papua New Guinea. With its rich biodiversity and cultural heritage, it is populated with nearly 8.5 million people, with 18% in cities. Most people live in traditional social groups based on farming and religion, with 95% of the population being affiliated with Christianity at some level. These societies and clans within the 22 provinces that make up the country are highly valued by the Papua New Guinea Constitution, playing a significant social role in local and national community life. As one of the most rural countries in the world, connectivity in Papua New Guinea is hard due to the mountainous terrain across the country from the Western Highlands to the east headland of the peninsula into the ocean, with hundreds of offshore islands. The 700-kilometre Highlands Highway piggybacks the New Guinean Highlands and is a robust lifeline for Highland villages to convene and commute in daily business. 852 known languages are indigenous to customary communities, approximately 7,000 speakers per language. The 4 official languages of the country include English, Tok Pisin, Hirimotu, and Papua New Guinea Sign Language, which belongs to one of the largest language groups, about 30,000 deaf people. Papua New Guinea Sign Language, as an indigenous language in its own right for deaf people to break away from Melanesian Sign Language, was endorsed in 2015 under the National Disability Policy. The Papua New Guinea Sign Language Dictionary, still in its formative stages, will soon be released to replace the current Melanesian Sign Language Dictionary, which is heavily accentuated with Melanesian Sign Language and Signed English. The Dictionary project is a community-based collaborative project with at least 4 stakeholders: the deaf community, Callan Services National Unit, Stretch Productions and the University of Cologne, Germany. The research team is undertaken by Professor Marie Carla Danny Adon and Dr. Melanie Broek. The network of Callan Services for Persons with Disabilities in collaboration with churches, non-government organisations and development partners provides inclusive education and community-based rehabilitation services in 19 inclusive education resource centres, which underpin the National Education Board's Special Education Policy. Over 440 deaf children access education, many through Target Schools for the Deaf. The Target Schools for the Deaf house many of the 17 deaf education resource units in the country. These children receive specialist education by teachers of the deaf, assistant teachers and educational interpreters. Callan Services National Unit is the lead and coordinating agency of the network of Callan Services and works with its partners to assist in facilitating this work. The challenges of identifying a deaf child at an early age, getting specialist health support for the child if needed, and travelling to the nearest inclusive education support centre are widespread for many families, especially in rural areas. Even so, the philosophy and implementation of inclusive education policies can be exigent, given the limited resources and personnel in effectively meeting the needs of the child and family.
I'm born normal. After 3 years now, I'm got sick. I'm got sick na mi black semi kolonga. St. Joseph Rural Hospital on Mingedi. Dr. Jaworski, Dr. Yang, I'm to mi black him can track long, help him, save him life long him. But then I'm by time him come up baby, and by time him, I'm by enough talk na. So I'm talk long and I'm come up. I'm come up baby, so me put him long, bilum. So some time me see him go to classroom. The school want them all normal beginning. But some person all beginning make him kind of send this la kind beginning and he use a different one another beginning. Time all go inside all by funny na lab long him. This la kind so. And then me feel him me sorrow long na me. Kiss him and beg him. Me don't see him in school. Narapla lo nipet. Concern lo mi, big pa concern lo mi long. Live long en. I must make him work money. I must have him some money long yet because all the some money. I mean ask him some friend, relative lo mi pla, one talk lo mi pla long. Support him live long. I mean by making work money. I mean must get on house long him long. Look at him yet. Because this like in line now all stuff you know got one man or Mary I'm must support him na look at him. Because plant all good line, planting on good line too stuff. Also na this la big concern me long, live long. Beginning girl blow me nibet.
Deaf people are perceived as long, which means mentally retarded or depraved in talk Pishin. Lack of societal awareness of the culturally deaf community with a unique socio-linguistic identity has long stigmatised deaf people into an inherent sense of being ashamed. Hence, loving care and empathy is required more than ever to help deaf people integrate into society as full citizens. Families who wish for their deaf child to be able to function in local community life often experience a common financial hardship in relation to sending the child to school if they live far away from the specialist educational services.
Most of those deaf children, they are living in the villages, and some of them even cannot afford. And then also for the geographical location, they cannot make it from that location to the nearest deaf unit. So they kind of depending on us, asking us, is there any possibility for a bus fare where my child can go and get the services? And then we are kind of telling them, no, we don't have these funds. So is it possible for you to bring your child from that location to nearest to where the resource center is so that he or she can get help? But it's not working because they cannot bring it because town, the living cost is expensive, so they cannot bring their child to stay with another parent or family to receive the nearest service. So it's a big problem now.
Here at the sub-center, we have a lot of problem that we are facing right now. When the deafs are identified, they are at home, and for us to go and reach for them, to help them, it's a little bit difficult because sub-center is have a least staffs here. We have manpower, less of manpower, financial, and also transport to be provided and help us to access the early deafs and identified. But the most better idea that I normally have is to get identified and bring them to live in the Kalang service because we have the facilities here. We have a dormitory which we can cater for them and help them to get into the system of the service that we are providing.
Deaf children can relate to each other well through similar life experiences and do maintain lifelong and meaningful friendships. Where there is a critical mass of deaf children in one place, for example at a deaf education resource unit or at a school where there are many deaf children, they can successfully understand the world around them as visual learners.
Meeting sample or silip long way all come all that meeting was beginning blooming got thinking loim all must get me looks away loim was like lo go school like lo line so go elementary stuff close to lo me go all mangi all yet go play all go to all right all sawe all certain idea all go come time no sawe lo idea so go lo science school all come all sawe lo sign lo all working sign good. Me go line me to one blood time me go last year 2016 and me spend him 1 whole hour blo me lo patima. All line him good okay ta narala line him narala sawe narala make him narala sawe okay ta sawe good through. Na me too me go start lo 1 whole day lo this lap 8 o'clock go in up lo 12 o'clock me sawe lo live sign. Now me line him picnic blo me na stop. So sample stop him all yet all sign mangi all yet go school blo yet. All by sawe too. Teacher all by teach him all go complete him uni all. All by sawe.
Once the Papua New Guinea Sign Language Dictionary and Grammar text comes out and associated teaching resources, it will help families to better communicate with their deaf child at home and teach them essential skills in local customary life. Families and all in the village or local community will benefit from mutual support and learning from one another through parents' associations.
Pignin blomia olio pasta biar sol mi traimbes lo pudim all school na pignin blo all narla ya all ngolo school na mi pignin blomi all ngolo school ya mi no sai same lo ngolo school work or school meeting mi sai go na all narla all no go mi sai go tok sabel all emi pignin blomi all ngolo school na blo yubla no pudim lo school yubla pudim all magi lo school mi sai to also.
Home signs greatly influence and shape the early development of a sign language, as evident in this family of 4 deaf children, and regional variations are expected, just the same as local dialects. The youngest deaf sister, Ina, attends the local mainstream school where her uncle teaches.
Ina is a difficult child because I don't have a sign language with me, so I cannot connect with her. At the moment, I want to help her, but how can I communicate with Ina? Because I don't have the materials where I will teach her and then she knows the signs and then I'll connect with her. But at the moment, no, I don't have any connection with that small girl. That small girl doesn't have any connections with me. Sorry, now it's term 3 test. This is something that I'm facing in the classroom. When I teach the whole of the 70 kids in the classroom, 69 other children who are right in the classroom. I know 70, but I don't have any proper connection with that. I know, because I don't have the teaching materials for the deaf children in my classroom.
Mainstream teachers will also benefit from the Papua New Guinea Sign Language Dictionary and Grammar text and from staff from IERCs with specialist teaching resources based on these. Educational interpreters bridge the gap wherever available. Many teachers of the deaf supplement with their capacity to facilitate communication support. Assistant teachers have a role in introducing Papua New Guinea Sign Language as a socio-cultural language. For this service to be fully developed and maintained, the Government of Papua New Guinea at national, province and district levels, non-government organisations, businesses and local communities will need to provide a lot of financial support for salaries and training. A residential school for the deaf at Mount Sion in Goroka has closed down, paving the way for the inclusive education ideology, where deaf children are being educated in a local school. But often schools are under-resourced, and teachers of the deaf would need to travel long distances for outreach services.
There's inclusive education stuff inside, or kissing sign language, all go through like this, but all no go in deep. All no go in deep lo sign language. So tam also help him all nara plot picking you sem disabled, kind of sem. But tam or come lo these ones now. How long lo interpret him? Hard now almost so at least like partner one time lo help him some way to all can train him this lo early childhood teacher to this plan. Yeah.
Yeah, before I'm putting one in there, Bugimolo, I was starting to school and I'm good la molo this life so. Now you allow some finish here. Or sometimes hard to you about to move round the walk at up corner. Lo dis last tintin o mi lagi mo sem jubla bugi mol ken na. Jubla sabe lo sign blow na o sem bai pati chimole jubla sabe. O tichan o sem o jubla tichan o sabe lo oliet. Lo pati chim o sem bia jubla lo na. Olem bahadia. O bales o tichimol tu e sabe. Lo dis last tintin o sem mogut bai pa putimol inside now bai balani mol or sign now something now sabe good now can go out to school or narabla school number one. Satin now so me trove cambe. So you must come up in this la. Tintin lo me am gosen.
As an inclusive teacher or classroom me talk. Okay. Mr. Looking was hard lo mi sana talk na tu prasumatin sidaw lo mi sign one time Mr. Looking was okay. So mi teach mol nara prol pikinini na tu pikinini start mi sa paini mahad. Osem time tu nara prasanti because inside lo classroom mi plawak lo time ne one plus subject finish igolo nara subject finish igolo nara ken so it's like time start here osem ikat mi na pla explain now and mi sa gonna explain lo clear nara mange start nara enol boy lo mi.
Deaf education resource units at target schools, which forge a partnership with the network of Callan services, bring deaf children from nearby villages to a specialist classroom with a hearing teacher of the deaf, usually, and very often a deaf assistant teacher. Bicultural and bilingual teaching processes have proved to be complicated when teachers are not yet fully skilled in Papua New Guinea Sign Language or have not yet been shown the best strategies to use to be able to teach deaf people literacy skills efficiently.
The barriers that I have, especially in teaching, is that especially with the sign language, it is very difficult to get my students to understand how to read especially and also how to write. They find it very difficult, and I also, because some of the words that I even do not know the actual sign language to sign to them, which I normally spell out the words to them. Those are some of the barriers where I face when I go through teaching the deaf students.
The network of Callan services has greatly increased the number of children who are identified deaf and are accessing inclusive education practices with individual education plans to support their learning goals either at a target school or at the Deaf Education Resource Unit. More deaf children pass compulsory grade tests in order to complete their secondary education and improve their chance to study further or gain employment. The greater progress of deaf students has proved a great blessing for the young women and men involved, and at the same time it has provided a huge challenge for the Inclusive Education Resource Centre teachers, mainstream teachers in secondary schools and technical schools, and tertiary education lecturers.
Now to let me come in. But me believe I can catch up. I can catch up, and I can. Time me school yet, I can lining. Me like it's a pedi must lining PNG sign language. Now me must read. Now I must write. Now I must work money one kind of all Arab la Papua New Guinea also be harim na work one kind must one kind of all. Me hamomas lo mila me tu mila lining tu na. Me can communicate one thing Zebedi, me can understand me, na me can understand him too. Yes, me how much suppose me plama publish lo deaf beginning, he can got association and me black and serum idea na tintin good pla. Lo support him lo beginning lo me pla. You can discuss na raising money na asking all government lo chip in come inside na you can help him. Los la kain rot mitin emba good pla.
Deaf school leavers may often yearn for enhanced social relationships within the deaf community. In order for the community to advocate for their own rights and for a better quality of life through membership with World Federation of the Deaf and establishment of provincial deaf associations which could become members of a national and coordinated body, Papua New Guinea Deaf Association is required. A unified deaf community leads to positive outcomes. Their empowerment to prompt social change, their boosted self-esteem that they can do as much as a hearing person, and their rightful place in society as the voice of deaf people. Deaf people talk with their hands and see with their eyes. They can and should contribute and participate equitably in society. The right to education in sign language for deaf people, safeguarded by the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, should enable deaf people to lead independent, fulfilling and purposeful lives with efficient communication skills and to earn a living. Deaf assistant teachers as role models have the aptitude to introduce the children to Papua New Guinea Sign Language in a nurturing environment with qualified teachers of the deaf. Javi began as an assistant teacher and then progressed into qualifying as a teacher of the deaf after upgrading her secondary grades and obtaining a diploma of primary teaching with encouragement from her IERC colleagues. Callan Inclusive Education Institute has established an applied diploma of special education and offers training workshops for IERC and mainstream teaching personnel how to teach deaf children in their faculty.
As a teacher, inclusive education teacher, I would like to go for more studies so that I can equip myself with knowledge to come back and teach my students very well so that there is a better understanding so they can be able to go to the next level.
Nibeth is now learning independent life skills at Mingendi Target School and catching up on her education, just as her father has wished for her to earn a living.
I tried my best to teach them some life skills like cooking, carpentry, gardening, sewing, baking and all this, so that when they leave school, they will go back to their village and do what we have done here so that they will earn some money for their future and live comfortably in the village.
Deaf people have been stigmatised for their invisible disability, for not being able to hear, to communicate with many others, and to have access to their traditional customs, thus socially excluded and unskilled. Further education to guide a deaf person's learning development into employment is essential to their self-esteem and consequently improves their opportunity to function in everyday life.
Understanding of deaf students is very, very low. And our interpreters here, they haven't been to a professional school or university where they will have all the other signs. They do only simple signs. But for Papua New Guinea, we have policies, guidelines, rules there telling us that inclusive should be working in Papua New Guinea, but it's not working properly. Being a resource center staff and a coordinator, I see that there is a need to help the deaf and blind in the resource center. They need to stay in a hostel, so they go to nearby schools. Our resource center here, we have 200 plus community-based rehabilitation volunteers. So the community-based rehabilitation officers, they are right out in the villages. So they are the ones who walk into mountains, valleys, rivers. They look for all children with disabilities. And when they find one child or two who are school-aged and are still at home, they come to the resource center. They tell us, the teachers here, that there is a child like this at that corner. So the teachers go there and they do home intervention there. Yeah. Then when they are ready, they bring them to the units. So when we bring them here, it's like a community, a deaf community. We provide deaf community so they communicate with each other in the language that they learn in the classroom.
Jill Lino, a dux of grade 8 and 10 classes, is studying civil engineering at Lay Unitec. She has a full-time interpreter there from IERC Morobe. She grew up in Vanamo and was fortunate to gain professional and emotional support from her mainstream teachers, IERC teachers, and hearing classmates who could communicate with her. She also had access to a deaf assistant teacher, Fiona Pillow, as a consistent source of support. Most importantly, she received passionate support from her family. Since 1994, the National Education Board has agreed to the establishment of 23 IERCs, and 22 of them are providing or facilitating mainstream education for children who are deaf and others with a disability. Outside of the network of Callan services, the Red Cross IERC focuses on the education of deaf children only. The Department of Education funds over 200 IERC teachers and provides recurrent funding for their work. The IERCs in the country have roughly reached 10% of the children who are deaf in the country, and therefore is a significant network to connect them to Papua New Guinea Sign Language and the deaf community. Being with other deaf people consolidates a deaf individual's identity with the community and gives them a place to stand up for themselves with pride and access to peer and collegial support and socialising through Papua New Guinea Sign Language. The deaf community has so long fought for their own Indigenous sign language to be recognised as the correct linguistic construction for deaf children in the education system as opposed to signed English. Melanesian Sign Language contains signed English to a very high degree. It is not a natural sign language as opposed to Papua New Guinea Sign Language, and it needs to be promoted and ultimately accepted. The network of Callan services has a special role in the deaf community's progression, funding their community development projects and providing them a deaf space where they can celebrate their culture and language.
Deaf education is unique and requires very close attention, requires support, very close support, in order to enhance their learning. It's very important for PNG Sign Language for the deaf community because sign language is their language, and in all the deaf community they have to communicate one way or the other, so sign language is the mode of communication, so plays a very vital role in the deaf community. So we very much ask that if the government can open doors, we can send people out to overseas where they have qualified interpreting universities, where they can get those qualifications, come back and support this.
Deaf people in Papua New Guinea are passionate advocates to advance their rights and are motivated to learn about their self-awareness and to upskill themselves as Papua New Guinea Sign Language tutors to change societal attitude. Deaf Papua New Guinea sign language tutors should be able to go out and teach hearing people in the public, for example the police and the army, not only sign language but also deaf cultural elements for deaf awareness.
With the endorsement of PNG Sign Language as the fourth language, this is like a stepping stone for deaf people here in the Papua New Guinea, especially the deaf community. You will see that other countries, it took so long for the government to endorse sign language in their own countries, but for Papua New Guinea, they saw the work that we were doing with the development of the PNG sign language, and we have the deaf community coming in within Mosby. So that's where, when the national disability policy was established, the government made an endorsement to have PNG sign language as the fourth language. And this is like an achievement for the deaf community. The impact is that it gives them power. It gives them the right that, see, we have the right to do anything. Now they recognize our language. We can be empowered. We can do whatever other people can do. So like for us here in Papua New Guinea, even though we are not well established, but with the endorsement, it's like a support, a boost for the work that we are doing. So it will like empower our deaf community to be recognized, to participate equally in all developments that is happening in Papua New Guinea. At the end of the day, we want someone, a deaf person, to be advocating with the government, talking about their rights, talking about education, talking about employment, talking about health service. So this is one thing that we want the deaf community to achieve. Like in other countries, you will see deaf people, they've gone up to the university level. They are doing a lot of empowering work, or they are doing a lot of advocacy with their own government on their rights, on sign language, on interpreting, on all other stuff. So we want the same here in Papua New Guinea. That's why, with the support of the Light for the World funding and through the development of the PNG Sign Language book, the establishment of the associations, strengthening of the deaf community, this is, we are looking at empowering our deaf people to make them talk or to have a voice.
The network of Callan services is fortunate to have collaborated with generous funding partners. And if it was not for this support, deaf children would stay behind in the village, never go to school, and be marginalised from society. Education is crucial, especially for a deaf child to become more autonomous. Schools that focus on the deaf are a bedrock of deaf culture. The birth of an emerging deaf community where children form deep friendships for positive well-being, and upon leaving school, create a deaf space, as in a club, where they continue to stay in touch and inform each other about what is happening around them in sign language. That is the basis on which a deaf association usually originates from. Culturally driven advocacy and a collective voice to be seen and heard across many spectrums of society at local, national and international levels. Unemployment is very high in the deaf community, unfortunately. When deaf people may be viewed as lacking in skills, yet they have an aptitude to learn fast and work hard when given the chance. They are often paid below legal wages. They can be reliable and loyal employees when given the chance, and do provide economic benefit for their diligence with their sharp eyes, which is defined as part of the Deaf Gain global concept. A main obstacle for deaf people in Papua New Guinea is that they need to pass grade 8 exams before starting secondary education, and the majority of deaf children do not return to school if they fail them. Their progress becomes very limited without any school qualifications. They need doors to be opened for them, to be given the opportunity to upgrade and complete the education they deserve to get access to. In the past decade, especially since the Papua New Guinea Deaf Olympics in 2010, more deaf adults are finding themselves in a viable position to marry and bear children, since they found out through the internet and international deaf networks that other deaf people do marry, often to other people who are deaf around the world. The honour of having children for Papua New Guinea society is deemed highly valuable for deaf people, and the majority of their children are hearing, also known as coders, children of deaf adults, with a unique hybrid identity, growing up in the deaf world with Papua New Guinea Sign Language and interacting with the hearing world. They are very likely to proceed to become interpreters to bridge the cultural gap between both worlds. Deaf people, as Long Long, regularly experience discrimination and oppression by the majority of hearing society who view them as inferior. Deaf people may be mistreated in common situations where a misunderstanding or a cross-cultural communication breakdown occurs. Unfortunately, in Papua New Guinea, this can often lead to physical abuse.
how can they explain themselves when the courts will not fully understand their stories, when the police will not fully understand their stories. So it's a major challenge for us. And so for us in government, it has to be working through the major stakeholders and a lot of government agencies so that they are also mainstreaming disability requirements, or especially for the hearing aid population, mainstreaming that into their programs and policies. For the first time in Papua New Guinea, have the sign language interpreter on national television on the 3rd of December last year, which was the International Disability Day. Now that took the attention of the country, that we did have these citizens who were living with the deaf population, and they needed to understand what was happening around the country. Many times they were left out. And so including that on television started paving that way for people to understand that the disability, removing barriers, making rights real, cuts across a whole sector. There's a lot of training that needs to happen, not just for the TV presenters, but for the whole range of sectors that we are talking about. Even within this department, we need training. I should be communicating with you using sign language. I haven't been trained on that as yet.
The government acknowledges the challenges within the sector to become more deaf-aware and learn Papua New Guinea Sign Language, one of the official languages, to communicate with deaf people, and is showing support to advance the social development of the deaf community. Interpreters are a very young profession, already showing capacity to facilitate communication between deaf and hearing people.
When they see interpreters doing presentations, when they are not satisfied, they go straight to us and tell us. And we accept, although maybe few take it, they don't take it too well, but it's a challenge for us because at the same time, they want to get the main and correct information for them so that they understand. So when they do that and communicate with us, it also challenges us to improve ourselves and enhance our skills as well.
I embrace the interpreters training, the interpreters being established properly in this country so that they will be the bridge between the hearing and the deaf community. The people still think that the sign language is for the deaf, but they don't realize that it's them that they are the barrier. It's them and their attitude are the barrier, not the deaf. And if they can have that spirit of acceptance, the issue of spirit of acceptance, the belonging, the ownership, that is one key strategic statement that should be repeated when we are doing awareness, so that people take ownership of the sign language. And then that is how it will make it easier for the deaf community to participate inclusively.
Hence, stigma does kill and love can heal. As Secretary Anna Solomon already pointed out, barriers must be removed and deaf people's rights are real. In today's world with disability and human rights legislation, the deaf community has a special role to educate the public about Papua New Guinea Sign Language and deaf cultural awareness. The critical mass of deaf children in an accessible and nurturing environment will instigate their positive socio-linguistic identity. This will lead to the establishment of a deaf association for strong deaf leadership and membership of a community where Papua New Guinea Sign Language can be promoted, strengthened and sustained. It will precipitate the need to form a parents' association for a greater voice in determining what is best and right in the education of their deaf child.
For future, I believe that early identification, referral, and then early intervention at an earlier age, and then for government to, even though we have the policy, but it has to really make it happen by putting up a system where teachers must be, even though they are being trained, but they are not pushed to that level where they can really accommodate for those children in the classroom as well. They are mostly kind of looking at hearing and not giving enough to the deaf. So teachers must also be well trained, inclusive, not inclusive but the mainstream teachers, so that when we identify at an early age, prepare them and then send them to the nearest school, they are also given the same classroom accommodation and teaching in the classroom, so the learning and the way of operating is like kind of monitored at its level, so it's progressing well along the way.
My vision for the students that I have in here, at least they can go through the formal education, and they can learn something which they can be able to make their own living at home, and also they can at least go into some government sectors or private company sectors and have some jobs where they can help themselves live independently.
One of the big vision is that deaf education must go in line with other educational goals, that they can also advance from primary level, secondary level to university and seek employments and be part of the society as a whole.
In the future, we have deaf people advocating for their own rights. We have deaf people being employed. We have deaf people becoming professional like lawyers or doctors or any other stuff, like you people here. We also want more support of the education, deaf education in the country. And also, I think the other issue is to have residential. If the government can support residential schools within the deaf community, I think it will help them to come together, and then that's where they build up the community, and that's where they will improve. So that's one area that we will look at the government to support.
I dream that Papua New Guinea government should have a deaf technical vocational school or a life skills training school. And that will be first of its kind in the country.
In 10 years' time from now, our deaf community will be understood by Papua New Guinea. Not just speaking with interpreters, but actually Papua New Guineans also doing sign language so that they understand the needs of this deaf community, and they also understand that they are equal citizens of this country. They have a right to every services that are provided. So what are those services, and where can each organization and each person try to influence that change?
The work of Callan Services National Unit and the network of Callan Services for persons with disabilities is only possible because of the presence of and support for Inclusive Education Resource Centres and Callan Inclusive Education Institute, approved under the Education Act of Papua New Guinea. On that basis, the network of Callan Services' passionate drive to dispel societal assumptions that deaf people were not worthy of education has brought deaf education to over 440 children through early identification and intervention programs and specialist resource services. Whereas merely 10 years ago, it was almost unimaginable that these children could have a decent educational experience today. On par with Callan's vision, the underlying message here is to identify deaf children early, bring deaf people together, educate them to the highest expectation possible, and to empower them to thrive and succeed in adulthood. Then they will lead their people and grant them a voice to prompt positive social change in all corners of Papua New Guinea society. As diverse as Papua New Guinea already is, with over 800 languages, Papua New Guinea Sign Language has an innate ability to break down barriers where everyone, deaf and hearing, can communicate with their eyes and hands. Societal awareness and empathy for deaf people will then heal the scars of Long Long. Love and respect for one another eventually will unite Papua New Guinea society as a more tolerant and inclusive country. This will surely mean that, as stated in the country's inclusive education policy, the Constitution upholds the right of every child to basic education. Deaf children will be educated to fulfil their potential. And then, and only then, the vision of the Papua New Guinea National Disability Policy 2015 to 2025, remove barriers, make rights real, can then be a reality, and we will have enabled equal rights for the members of the deaf community, and they can participate and contribute meaningfully in an inclusive society.